microbiologist says bugs, they mean bacteria. When they say critters, they mean bugs. When they say animals, they mean critters. What's your favorite one? The garlic flavor in vanilla icing?
And tobacco
Yeah.
vanilla icing. Those are both just awesome.
What do we do if it doesn't have enough ethanol or propylene glycol in the formula itself? Where would we go in that route?
Well, that's when I pass it off to Jack and Rodney.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Flavor, a podcast brought to you by Beck Flavors and hosted by yours truly, Michael Schubert. We have a really interesting episode today. We're going to talk about our number one operating procedure behind safety, which is quality. And quality goes into everything we do here at Beck Flavors, and we hold it in such high regards. Today I'm joined by the lovely Miss Tracie Lenz and our quality manager, Dan Quillen. How are we doing today, guys?
Doing great.
Doing great.
Awesome. Well, we're really excited to have you guys here. We've talked a lot about different aspects of the world we live in here at Beck, and quality kind of goes into everything from what we do on the R&D facility side to what we do on the production side. So let's kind of start out with what we start out with everybody from Beck is, how did you get here, Tracie? What brought you to Beck Flavors?
Well, I was actually kind of brought in by a former employee, and I started out in operations, which gave me really good background. I closed work orders, I got familiar with raw materials, labeling, a lot of that paperwork. So when the regulatory specialist job opened up, the quality manager at that time said, you know what? I can teach you quality things. You already know the system. You know all the backbone. So now I've been a regulatory specialist for 3 years.
Awesome. That's exciting. Well, it seems like you kind of found your way into it and found your way to Beck, which is very reminiscent of a lot of the employees here at Beck. So Dan, same thing for you. What got you into quality?
Into quality, so I started my career in microbiology working in a pretty strict micro lab. From there, I got a lot of experience working in production environments for beverage companies or cheese conversion companies and places like that. I started back 3 years ago as the quality manager. That's kind of the whole story.
Yeah, so it started out with like science, and just for our audience, you said the word micro a lot. What are you referring to when you talk about micro?
Micro as in microbiology, so bacteria, yeast, molds, and a little peek of the lingo, since I'm going to slip up. So when a microbiologist says bugs, they mean bacteria. When they say critters, they mean bugs. When they say animals, they mean critters.
Okay. So we got to keep that in context here, that when you're talking about bugs, it's not really like ants and gnats and stuff. We're actually talking about microbials, or more like bacteria.
Yes.
So kind of let's start out by going through, Tracie, if you could, what are some of the certifications that we have here at Beck Flavors?
So at Beck we do, mostly we do kosher. Everything that we put out is kosher. Every raw material is kosher. Every finished good is kosher, and I oversee that. We also do organic certifications, so I take care of that. And those are our main two certifications, I would say.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that a lot of my customers, the kosher certificate comes in big for them. That's something that's asked a lot throughout all the flavors that we produce. And then Dan, I know that one of the really cool things about Beck is when you work in all the different food industries is you really need an SQF certification as well. Can you explain a little bit what is SQF and how that applies to us here at Beck Flavors?
Yes. So when Tracie mentioned kosher and organic certifications, those are the certifications we put on our product. SQF is a food safety certification, which stands for Safe Quality Food, and that's certification we put on our production facility. and we're going to get deep into alphabet soup here, but SQF is a standard, like a step-by-step process of how you build out your manufacturing environment to make sure you're producing safe. There's lots of others that are considered equivalent. There's BRC, FSSC, AIB, dozens, and all of these are considered equal under GFSI. So, like I said, a lot of letters coming at you.
It takes me back to my teaching days right there.
So GFSI is the global agreement that all these different schemes under GFSI are interchangeable. So back before that agreement, if you wanted to do business in Europe or England, you had to have BRC. If you wanted to do business with Target, for example, you had to have AIB also, because that's what they wanted to see. And Walmart had their own that they wanted to see. So the GFSI plan was to make things easier on a business like us to do business and not have to carry 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the same food safety programs.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that breakdown and that alphabet soup there. So when we talk about SQF here at Beck, you're definitely talking about the way that we do our production over there. But what does that look like in terms of how do we get our ratings? What does that look like? Do we get monthly people checking in with us? Is it yearly? And then from there, what is our rating?
So our rating currently is excellent. So the way SQF scores it, 96 and up out of 100 is the excellent rating. I don't have all the other categories memorized because we're so excellent. But these, we get evaluated once a year based on their scheme. So there is a booklet of a couple hundred different items that we have to make sure that we're covering on a daily basis. So yes, we get an auditor comes in and kicks rocks over once a year, but you have to maintain it every single shift of every single day.
And there are a lot of customers too that want to see specific SOPs that have to do with the SQF audit. And also kosher and organic, those people also come in and audit us my rabbi comes in and audits us about every 3 months or so. So there's a lot of people coming in auditing for food safety and food certifications.
What is an SOP? What do you mean by that acronym?
An SOP is a standard operating procedure. Every single thing we do at Beck Flavors has an SOP, and we follow that to the letter. If anyone comes in and says, well, how do you do this? How do you do that? We have a document for that.
Now let's jump back, now that we talked about all these different certifications and the different ways we view, like our outside organizations view us based off the pieces of paper that we qualify for by checking all these boxes. And let's kind of talk about our materials and like truly the quality part of Beck, which is like one of my favorite things here at Beck. I know in my first 2 days I spent a ton of time learning about the quality department from you as well. But let's start very big, right? We have an approved vendor. We're now buying materials from them. When that material comes to Beck Flavors, Dan, where do we start there? How does that process kind of work for the quality team?
Let's actually take a step back to the approved vendor part.
Okay.
I mean, that's a big piece of qualifying who you're buying your product from. You don't want to buy from any schmuck with, a pumpkin patch.
Yeah.
So, Walmart just had an issue with irradiated shrimp, hit the news in a big way, and that's their supplier's fault. So for us, we have to make sure that the suppliers are in good standing. They're not trying to import under felonious names to avoid regulations, and essentially just in good standings as a company. So if you're buying from a disreputable person, you're going to get low quality product. There is a measure of trust when you're taking something from someone else that, no amount of testing I can do can circumvent that if we buy from someone we don't trust.
Yeah, and we kind of talked a little bit about that in a previous episode with Norm Snyder and Reeds. And if you haven't checked out that episode, I encourage you to go back to our profile, hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of them, like, comment, but most importantly, check out Norm's episode when we talk about ginger extract, because he said the same thing. Peruvian is the way we need to buy it because it's a qualified vendor, some of the best product comes from there. So we know those inputs are very important. So after they get through the approved vendor, then what does it look like for your team?
So once we start bringing in an item from a vendor, so we approve the vendor, but we also approve the individual item. So a lot of these are pretty pure chemicals we're getting, but the isomers could be a little different. The name is the same from vendor to vendor, but if this isomer ratio is off, it'll taste different. Something that maybe the whole world doesn't understand, your tongue is more sensitive than any chemical box, piece of machine, gas chromatograph that we have. So just having those isomers off will throw the flavor off. So we have to qualify each ingredient from each supplier.
How do we qualify those?
Taste.
Taste?
We are a flavor company. Taste is always going to be the number one for quality. So we taste every single lot of every ingredient we ever receive into our production environment, in addition to testing their chemical specs. So RI and specific gravity are the two big ones for us.
In that like approval process, do we rely on the certified flavorists we have here at Beck to kind of help us when we're going vendor to vendor with items?
Yes, they are kind of the tent pole for the flavors. They built the flavor, they know what it's supposed to taste like, so it's kind of on them to say, yes, this vendor is good enough for this item, or no, that'll throw off the flavor that I built. So I'll have to build it different, or you just have to find a new vendor.
And then Tracie, I want to ask you like that second tier to that question, which is, so after we go through all these processes and before we start tasting, do we work off of like only samples that arrive and then we pull them ourselves, or do we try and eliminate some of that time it takes us to get out there and pull materials by testing off different ways?
So raw materials are different than finished goods. I primarily, when I am in the lab, I'm testing a finished good. We have retained samples of, like with raw materials, we have retained samples. We have samples of what we deem is the appropriate taste for the raw material, so the new material needs to taste just like that. And it's the same with our finished goods. We have the most recent time we made the finished good, we have this brand new sample, and one of the tests that we do is tasting it to make sure it tastes like it did before.
Okay, so we're talking a lot about like tasting, and do we ever do any like smell tests, or is that a part of what goes into it, or any visual tests as well?
Yes, so the big word for taste testing is organoleptic testing, and that involves taste, odor, and appearance. Even though that's backwards to what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to do appearance, odor, taste. You look at it first. If it looks okay, give it a smell. If it smells okay, then you can taste it, which is putting it in your body. You don't want to put it in your body first and find out something's off.
Yeah, no doubt about that. We also do that a lot of times at home just naturally when the milk looks a little different. You start with the look, then you move to the smell, and then most of the time you can avoid the tasting side of that as well.
If the milk is split,
Yeah.
you don't even need to smell it.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so now we've kind of got a pretty good grasp of how we get all these good inputs here at Beck, right? That's one of our good CCPs, and if you don't know what a CCP is, that's a critical control point. We want to make sure that we're using good inputs so it comes out as a good output as well. So the materials get passed, you guys release it to the production team. Before they go in and start working with these materials you pass, what is that like? Do we do just a test before, a test after? What does like the pre-op test look like for us, Tracie?
Oh, well, pre-op, that's more That's less in the tasting. That's more in making sure that our environment, it's part of SQF. It's making sure that the production environment is suitable for making a flavor. So every morning, we double check our scales. We do ATP swabbing, which is making sure that the room is clean. And then there's various things that we do throughout the building. It's not just in the production room. We check temperatures of our refrigerators, of our freezers. We check our scales in the QA lab, not just in the production room. So all of that happens every single day to make sure that everything is just the same when they're fixing the product in the production room.
So Dan, it sounds like what Tracie was just referring to is we send our quality team in there, they make sure the environment's ready for them to produce, and then the green light's kind of going for the day. Now, they produce the flavor. What happens then? Where does your team come in there on the quality side?
Well, let me slide you on back one more time. When we're working with food, making food for somebody else, even if it's a flavor ingredient, your best shot at making sure that's safe is the production environment, checking the production process. There's kind of a false mindset in the industry even around microbiology testing. Where if you test the product at the end and it's good, then it's good. That's not the case. Even if you're testing at responsible levels, you got about a 9% chance of catching a problem if there is one. But if you're checking your processes, checking your equipment, you have a better shot of preventing a problem from happening than if you're relying solely on that end step micro test to say good or not good.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what you're saying is instead, like, you're setting yourself up for the end test to be more accurate if you put some controls in place prior to that to make sure the environment's accurate.
Yeah, it's called the hurdle approach, especially with bacteria. So there's bacteria outside, there's bacteria on your hands, there's bacteria everywhere. So how do you keep it out of the product? You have to put up all of these hurdles that the bacteria has to find a way to get past before it can get to the finished product. And that's what pre-op is all about, making sure it's clean. If it's clean, then bacteria probably didn't make it past that step. Your guys are following their GMPs and washing their hands on the way in, probably didn't go past that step either.
Okay, so that's why we have to do all those. That makes a lot more sense, and I'm going to write that one down, hurdle approach. I'm going to bust that out on my mom next time I'm over at her house and she's trying to make me clean. I'm going to be like, hey, don't want to mess up your hurdle approach here to cooking. So let's kind of dive then into what does it look like when we've produced? Where do we go then? What does the quality team start to do there?
So after it's produced, it goes to the quality lab, and again, it's largely taste. We want everything to taste like it's supposed to. And for that, we have to have a comparison to judge it against. You can't just, slurp a cherry flavor and say, yeah, that's kind of like cherry. You need to taste it against something that you know is what it should taste like. Because at a company like this, we probably have 24 different cherries, and they're all a little different. So we use either a previous lot that we know we've tested, we know that's how it's supposed to taste, or we'll have our flavorists here whip up a gold standard to taste against. And then the other big component for us at this step is our critical control point. I think you mentioned CCPs earlier, but what you were really referring to were our preventative controls, the GMPs, the sanitation, the approved supplier stuff. Our critical control is the evaluation of the formula, and that's done in the quality lab after it's made. So for us, our CCP is fairly simple. We use carriers to carry the flavor, or solvents, or whatever you want to call them. So a high ethanol percentage. If the ethanol is over a certain percent, bacteria is not going to survive. Propylene glycol is over a certain percent, it's not going to survive. And that's our critical control point, is making sure that if something went wrong and a pathogenic organism got into the product, is it going to survive? Do we need to test? Do we need to stop? So that's our critical control point.
So say it comes in under that critical control point, Tracie. What do we do if it doesn't have enough ethanol or propylene glycol in the formula itself? Where would we go in that route?
Well, that's when I pass it off to Jack and Rodney.
Who are two of our other quality techs that work on the quality team.
First, we test for pH. It needs to be under 4.6. You can tell I don't do that.
No worries, I'm learning a lot right now.
And if it is not under 4.6 on the pH scale, then it goes into our micro. We have a little test kit that we put a sample of the product in, and then we basically bake it. We incubate it for 24 hours. And if a bacteria does not grow in that time, then we deem it to be safe. And I'd also like to note, too, that not only does quality test the flavor from a microbiological standpoint and a taste standpoint, but that's also where we look at the label that has gone on to the product and make sure that we've got the correct lot number, make sure that we've got the right expiration date, make sure we have the correct non-flavor ingredients. There's a whole lot that goes into that check, more than just taste and biological.
Which leans more into like what your primary function as the regulatory specialist is documents and getting those documents and making sure they're accurate to give to customers and stuff.
Exactly.
So say on our yes or no, Dan, that it did come back yes. Would we know exactly what happened in that, or is there some additional things we would look at there?
So if we find that one of our lots have been contaminated with some sort of microorganism, that's when you have to investigate. You have to go on a bug hunt. See, I told you I'd say bug.
Yeah.
So you have to go out into the production facility and try and reason out where this could have happened. Is it an ingredient that spoiled? Is it maybe a pump that has a busted gasket that couldn't get cleaned? Is it a tank that didn't get rinsed out? So you just have to work through, where did this come from? How could it have gotten in, and how do we prevent it next time?
Now let's look at the other side of it. So it meets your thresholds of carriers. So we don't need to do the micro testing. Where do we go for that? Like what happens then? So we do like a taste test, like you were saying, against the gold standard. What are some of the other tests that we do to gather some specs for Tracie?
Yes, that's the point where we taste it. The physical chemical tests we do is refractive index and specific gravity. And those two tests are not so much, does it taste right? It's, was it batched right? So if someone's going to add too much of an ingredient or too little of an ingredient, that's how you're going to catch that, by a refractive index and specific gravity, because those units are going to get thrown off.
So, and then when you guys are tasting it, what do we taste in? Do you like put it in a soda if the flavor's made for a soda? Do you put it in like, a smoothie if it's a powdered flavor that goes in a smoothie? How do we taste?
Well, we have to have a standardized process for everything. And like I said, a lot of these things are carried in high alcohol percentage, and we don't want our poor quality techs falling down before lunch.
All drunk.
Plus, these are very powerful flavors as they come off our floor. Most of our customers use them at a 3% rate, so we don't want to drink them at a 100% rate. You'll blow out your taste buds.
Yeah.
So they are mixed into a sugar solution at a 3% rate, which for the most part tastes fine, but sometimes once you dilute it, it tastes awful, but it tastes equally awful as how it should. So that's how you pass it. Yeah.
So Tracie, then I kind of want to pivot back to you on this. So can anybody just taste here at Beck in the quality lab, or do we have like some sort of control in place to make sure the right people are tasting yes, yes versus yes, no?
No, it takes a little bit of training. It's not terribly complicated, but it helps to have some knowledge of what things taste like, how they're supposed to smell. And the more you do it, we go through trainings quarterly and all of us are signed off on, not all of us, but the people who do the tasting, we're signed off. Megan Sampson here.
Check out episode 1 of Behind the Flavor where we get behind the sensory.
She helps us out with how to identify flavors. She tests us quarterly. We have to try to figure out which is the bad flavor, which is the one that doesn't match. And there's some very, very minute differences in flavors, and so you really have to pay attention. It's not something that you're just like, yeah, that tastes fine. It's something you really need to pay attention to, and we sign off on it. So it's not like we can just say, yeah, you're fine, good.
Yeah, and then just to kind of jump on top of that too, like I used to be in that tasting program when I was in the production facility, and then now that I'm not regularly in the trainings, like I can't taste anything over there and like say yes, even though I still got it. Don't get that messed up.
You can taste if you want to, you just can't sign.
Can't sign off. So we talked a little bit about that. We talked a little bit about water soluble, but Dan, you and I both know not all of our flavors are water soluble. So do you take like an oil soluble flavor and put them in that sugar water solution?
Yep, we have oil soluble flavors, and no, you can't put those in water, they'll just float to the top. So we have to stir it into an icing base to try and hold the flavor at the ratio we're supposed to test it at, which can have nasty results. What's your favorite one? The garlic flavor
Garlic
vanilla icing?
And tobacco
Yeah.
vanilla icing. Those are both just awesome.
Yeah, you want to taste those at the end of the day because they'll
Yeah.
definitely coat that mouth and stick around for a while.
And that's a good point too with tasting. It makes sense if you've got a red hot chili pepper to taste on the bench. It doesn't make sense to taste that one first because you kind of blow out your taste buds. So you kind of try to taste the milder ones first, and the icings are always last.
Yeah. All right, now we've made it through production, the pre-op. We made it through how raw ingredients come in. So I guess would be, do we do anything, Dan, after we produce? Like, what does that look like at the end of each day?
After quality approves the flavor, it can be put in the system for shipping. And our last quality step in the process is making sure that the shipments are put together right. It's not all lab work and quality. As far as the customer is concerned, if they get sent the wrong flavor, they don't care how good the flavor was, they don't have it.
Correct.
So checking our shipments and destinations and load quantities is kind of our last QA check in the process.
Awesome. Okay, well, I appreciate you guys joining us today. That was a really informative episode, and I want to thank all you guys for joining in again for another episode of Behind the Flavor, where we got behind the quality. Just a reminder to everybody, hit that like, hit that subscribe button. If you're looking for any additional information on flavors, flavor trends, quality information, go to www.beckflavors.com and hit that request a sample. And we'll see you on the next one.